it's almost like now it's not necessarily like you being a great player. I think now it's your influence on the game is really how it should be looked at for a signature shoe.
Kyrie, my understanding is his shoe was very popular, at least maybe
Yeah.
before that Kyrie 8 situation. And then Kanye, I found it very interesting. You explained in one of your videos how the relationship will kind of continue, just be a little bit more subtle or a little less out in the open.
Yeah.
How much of a hit do you think each company is taking in these situations? Or is it, I mean, these companies being so big is just kind of a drop in the bucket?
Well, I think it's not necessarily a drop in the bucket. Kyrie's signature shoe was probably the most popular signature shoe that Nike has.
Mm.
The younger generation absolutely love Kyrie. Like, if it's not Steph, it's probably Kyrie that kids look up to at this point, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So his shoe was one of, if not the most popular. I think it's the most worn. Um, and I'll have to check these for sure. I think it's the most worn shoe in the NBA by other players is the
Mm.
Kyrie. It's either Kyrie's or Kobe's, one of those two.
Mhm.
So I think in that perspective, you'll see some impact there. But as far as like a long term impact, like there's people waiting in the wings to be the next Kyrie. Like you have Ja, who's obviously the most likely person to kind of fill those shoes, no pun intended. Like that's probably the next guy that's going to be there. And then as far as Kanye goes, um, I think Kanye's influence was larger than just Adidas. Kanye had an influence on culture in general. Whereas I don't think Kyrie had a larger influence on the culture of shoes and sneakers. Kanye had that sort of influence. So it'll be a bigger impact to Adidas, but that doesn't mean that Adidas is not going to be great regardless. You know what I mean? Adidas is going to be fine. As much as Kanye's, most adamant fans would like to think that Adidas is going to fail and they're going to go bankrupt, that's just not the reality. Adidas is going to be perfectly fine. In fact, it's been reported that they're going to start selling Yeezys without Yeezy branding. So the shoes will still be available. And at some point, people will see that shoe and think, oh, that's a nice shoe, and won't even relate it to Kanye. They already do it with Kobe's shoes, and Nike even does it with their old athlete shoes. So it's not like this is something that's foreign or new, or they're doing it just to Kanye to spite him. This is something that's already been going on. Generally, they give you a little more time before they release those shoes, but Adidas seems to be very aggressive in the way that they're going to re-release those shoes without the Yeezy branding within the next year, which will be interesting to see because you just don't know how the public is going to respond. The public does forget pretty easily, but we'll see how if they've forgotten enough where Adidas can sell non Yeezy Yeezys and no one blinks an eye.
You mentioned the next generation of NBA stars ready in their wings to, perhaps take that mantle from Kyrie. Since we last talked, I think you mentioned there's about 15 NBA stars with shoe deals. Has that changed since the last time we chatted? And do you think there'll be more? Do you see an increase happening with like the rise of NIL with like college players? Like how do you think that with this college athletes or even high school athletes, all that meshing together, has that affected how shoe deals are going to be done in the future?
I imagine that will. NIL deals are interesting. I can't think of an ideal where they're getting a shoe. Um, but I think that I have to believe that a sneaker deal is going to be reserved for professional players. I don't think college players will get shoes. But again, I imagine that could change it if there's an athlete that's big enough as a kid or in high school and college that rule will eventually be broken. But in the current market, I would say it's going to be a while. So in that number, like there's already too many signature shoe deals out there. Honestly, it's almost hard to keep up with how many people have deals. And then again, and there's people waiting in the wings. So Ja is the most like, okay, we expect Ja to get a shoe, like it's coming. But it's like, do we need Ja and Paul and Giannis and LeBron and KD and Kyrie? Do we need all of those? And Elena Deladon? Like, do we need all of these people to have signature shoes from one brand? You can argue yes and you could argue no, but it's like it's a lot, and there's no kid that's going to have everybody's shoe.
Do you think it's a problem of oversaturation? And do you think that would probably harm the brand, perhaps, with all those athletes having signature shoes?
I don't want to say it's oversat. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it is a little bit of oversaturation, but it's also like all of these guys and gals are stars in their own right, and they deserve. They put the work in to get their own signature shoe. You know what I mean? Like KD, yeah, you expect KD to have a signature shoe. Paul George, like you expect Paul George to have a signature shoe. You expect all these people to have one. Whether they need one, I think, is more of, do they have this? It's almost like now it's not necessarily like you being a great player. I think now it's your influence on the game is really how it should be looked at for a signature shoe. Like LeBron clearly needs a signature shoe. He's the guy that gets a signature shoe. Um, but like LeBron's affected the game in ways like that we won't that we'll see for 5, 10, 20 years. We'll see how LeBron has changed the game. KD, same thing, like this tall, lanky guy that plays like a guard and shoots the lights out. Like he deserves a shoe. So I think it's really, I think brands across the board, not just Nike, Adidas, Nike, New Balance, whoever, they're going to have to. It's not necessarily about how great of a player you are. It's about how much you affect the game, because there's tons of great players. But how do you affect the game? And are you marketable? Is there a marketing plan behind you? Because really, I mean, if you think about a signature shoe deal, that's really what it is. It's a marketing play to get you to buy that kind of shoe. And you have to be likable, or you have to be aspirational. You're either likable or aspirational, or you're the bad guy like Charles Barkley. Like, it just kind of depends on where you sit in that world, but it has to be marketable. And I think that is going to be the determining factor. That's the difference.
Yeah, and taking it back to what you just mentioned about NIL, that's why I agree with you, and I think that perfectly illustrates it. Is how much influence really is a collegiate athlete going to have, especially when you consider, college sports wise. I don't know that the ratings and the overall poll. I mean, you could be big man on campus at Duke, or star of that basketball team, and not really have a whole lot of pull and influence like you just mentioned. So that might be one of the
Yeah.
main limitations as far as that goes. When you look at, we have, I'm sure you, as all of us have been following, we've got Wemby in the draft next year. We've got Scoot Henderson, who looks very exciting. Traditionally, big men, and you can speak more to this, I'm sure you have much more knowledge on it than I do, but traditionally, big men don't seem to do as well selling shoes or getting shoe deals. Do you see Wemby as a potential for breaking that mold? I mean, we're seeing him take these bizarre, like one-legged three-pointers from deep and swishing them. Is he, enough of an anomaly that sort of increases his marketability and influence, or it's just going to take sheer dominance?
I think again. I think it's his. I think he'll get a shoe deal. Like it's clearly he's going to get a shoe deal.
Hmm.
Um, but again, I think he just has to be marketable. Like you can be a great player. Like Kawhi's amazing. Like and New Balance is trying their best to market him, but he just doesn't have that it thing. There's an
True.
it thing
Yeah,
to you that makes you that kind of flips the switch for you. So I just don't. I haven't seen enough of him. Let me say, I'll say I haven't seen enough of Wimby to know if he has that it thing. Like I haven't really heard him talk. You know what I mean? I've seen him ball out, and I've seen him, go crazy on the court, but I haven't really heard him like his charisma. Like, where's his charisma level? Like, where is that?
absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
where? How is that going to grab us? Like, that's why Shaq was such an anomaly. Like, Shaq sold shoes because he was Shaq. He was breakdancing on the court. He was, he was making rap songs. He was, doing all of these crazy things. He had like this comedic personality. It's fun. I'm a fun guy, but I'll crush you on the court. But I love to have fun at the same time. Like that's what made Shaq so appealing and allowed for Shaq to sell shoes. But no one, I don't know if Wemby has that. Like you need to be a big man to sell shoes. You have to be, in a sense, you have to be Shaq, or you have to be Giannis, which is just like this innocence. Like there's like Giannis's charm is his innocence. You know what I mean? That's what's marketable about Giannis. His innocence, his exploring of the American culture and coming from Greece and coming from where he came from. Like that's Giannis's appeal. That's like it's a story that can't necessarily, like, that's stranger than fiction kind of thing. And so that's where his appeal is. So he's able to sell shoes because people love who he is. People love who Shaq is. But we have to have that same thing with Wemby in order for it to be, I think, in order for it to reach the level of you're going to have a signature shoe.